Moving on to the defensive side, again, defensive line, we don't have to talk too in depth. I just think they're so versatile up front because of how many older guys they have. I do think the starters, though, should be Apu-Ika, Gabe Hall, TJ Franklin. Yeah. That's how I view it. I know that Cole Maxwell would probably get upset with that, and understandably, because Cole is awesome as well. I think those are the starters, and then Cole, Jackson, Player, and probably Braden Utley will probably be the next three, I would kind of think, even though there's a lot of other guys that could rotate in.
Cheaty,
Cooper. Yeah, exactly. That could profile as well. But either way, I do think you're going to see a lot of Jackson Player as the backup nose, but I also think you're going to see him play the other positions as well a lot.
Yeah, so Baylor has two primary fronts they run. They run the tight front, which is when, Apu lines directly up over the center, the head-up nose, the zero nose as they call it, and then they have two defensive ends who are playing that kind of two-gapping style lined up inside the offensive tackle where their job is to kind of control the guy in front of them. They're not trying to penetrate in the backfield. But then in another style that is called an underfront, but all that really means is that things are kind of shifted to where instead of guys playing head up over guys, they're playing more to play through the gaps. And that's an overgeneralization, but I bring that up because I think when Baylor plays that base tight front style that they like to do to control the run game, I think that's where you'll see Jackson Player as the backup nose. You can kind of just rotate him and Apu-Ika, get them each 30 or 40 snaps a game. But so Baylor didn't run that tight front against Oklahoma State last year. They ran that under front. And I think that's a situation where in the under, you could have Apu and Jackson on the field at the same time because you can use Jackson Player as like a true defensive end as opposed to Jackson's not a guy you want two gapping. Yeah. He's got short arms. He's 5'11", 6 foot. And so I think it's a situation where he plays backup nose and penetrates, or against teams that they want to run more of this under front where they have more of a true defensive end who's lined up on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle instead of the inside shoulder. Mm-hmm. That's a spot where he profiles really well. And I would just like to say, I'm just really happy to see in the most recent Athletic article, there was a quote from an opposing coach that said, Apu-Ika gets all the press, but watch out for Gabe Hall. And I was just like, I have been working towards this my whole life.
Sure. Yeah. I think if you've watched him play when he's been healthy, the dude is just, he's unblockable.
I know. There are so many clips of him just just taking his arms, sticking them in an O lineman, and it looks like the dad with the palm on the forehead of the kid. It's just like, no, you're not going to get near me. I'm just going to watch the ball. Don't worry about you. He's a freak. And I actually just saw this morning a mock draft from ESPN that had Apu-Ika at 29 and no mention of Gabe Hall. And I was just like, I still think Gabe is probably going to go above Apu in the NFL draft. I'm really happy for Apu. But anyway, I'm just really happy for Gabe because I think he's finally getting his due. The dude is just, Baylor Strength and Conditioning on Twitter will post these clips of these guys working out. And it's like the most, I don't know if it's like being cool or being a loser, but when I watch these videos, but if you watch Gabe Hall versus all these, it's like immediately noticeable. You're just like, oh, that's Gabe Hall. Because he just looks on a different level of athlete on a team that has a lot of great athletes and a lot of great athletes on the defensive line. He just looks different.
He does, and he's just a fascinating prospect to watch, and they need him to have a big year. If he's having a big year, that's going to be something really, really exciting to see. And also, we've talked about this a little bit, but I do think Dave Aranda wants to see more penetration from his defensive front than they got last year.
Yeah, they're gonna rely on the defensive line to just win more this year, and I think you're still going to see them run that base tight front where they're just controlling the run game on 1st and 10 and stuff like that. But whereas last year when you got in clear passing situations, they really kind of played a lot of games with whether it was Terrell Bernard blitzing or Jalen Petrie blitzing. I think this year it might be more just put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. Dude, it's very feasible to have on that line on a 3rd and 7. You could have Gabe Hall, you could have Apu-Ika, Jackson Player, and then guys like Matt Jones and Bryson Jackson coming off the edge. I mean, what do you? That's insane. Yeah.
Good luck.
So I think they're going to ask a lot from those guys this year.
I think so too, and Garmin Randolph as well. I mean, there's just so many. We're about to talk about them here in a sec. I do want to mention, the young guys real quick.
Yeah.
Trey Emery.
There's not many of them.
No. Trey Emery profiles really well to me at nose tackle. I do think that's where he's going to end up.
That's the only place that it works for him.
And roster-wise, it makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
they need another nose tackle for the future, so I think he profiles nicely there. I don't think he's going to play much this year, but I've mentioned this on the board. I do think he can probably be your second nose tackle a year from now.
Next year.
I don't think he can be the first. That's where I think the portal might have to come into play for them.
He could be your starting nose tackle next year, but that means that Baylor didn't get somebody better in the portal. And nothing against Trey. I think he's going to be a very good nose tackle. But if you're like wanting to reach your potential as a team, you generally don't want a redshirt freshman nose tackle.
Right. Not as your starter.
Exactly. So that'll be a position to watch. Cooper Lands is a guy I was really high on as a recruit and looked awesome in the spring game. And it was fun to see because in high school, he played kind of that jack position where he was standing up. But he was a guy who was obviously going to add weight. And the question you have with those guys is like, okay, are you going to be able to retain that athleticism, or now are you just going to be kind of like a small defensive end that doesn't really bring anything to the table? Yep. But then you see him covering Monterey Baldwin in space at 275 pounds. You're like, okay, never mind, this is going to be fine.
This is going to work out nicely. Yeah, definitely.
So I think those two, and then hopefully, TJ Franklin hopefully comes back next year.
Yeah.
That gives you a solid nucleus of young guys, but then, you're going to need to take some guys in the portal, and then hopefully with this defensive line class that they're building for this upcoming year, have one or two contributors there.
Definitely.